powers to itself in the way that these entities inevitably always do. It starts out by being more powerful than most governments already are in their own territory, and in the most sensitive areas, in particular the economic areas.
And so you're saying that if this treaty is signed, it will take precedence over our constitution, and no one will be able to resile from them, that treaty, unless you get the agreement of all the other signatories to it.
That's right, because at the moment there is no provision within this 200-page draft for any country that has signed up to this world government to get out from under its clutches. There is, if you go into the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change itself, the umbrella organization which is actually doing this, wants to turn itself into a world government. Under that convention, countries can leave. There's a thing written in saying, if you've had enough of this nonsense, you can leave. But there's no such provision in this treaty draft as it stands at the moment. Now, of course, we have to be careful and say it is only a draft, but it has been through several negotiating rounds. And as far as I know, not one democratic country has said, hang on a moment, over my dead body am I going to give up.
And indeed here we've got Kevin Rudd. We've got Kevin Rudd trying to be Prime Minister of the world, hasn't even acknowledged that such a treaty existed. If I hadn't read what you had said, I would not have known.
That, I think, is the most terrifying aspect of the whole thing. If I had not spoken out, nobody anywhere in the world would have known that they were playing this really wicked game, and where your democracy is going to be given away in a really substantial sense. I mean, we're not talking about minor powers just over, how many newts you can have and this kind of thing. It's really big. It's going to be how you run your economy, what fuel you can burn in your cars, how many cars you can have. It's going to be complete control over world markets in just the same way that the Communist Party used to exercise control over all the markets in the Soviet territory. We're turning the whole world into a Soviet system.
And you said in this speech, to the Americans, if it's signed, if Mr. Rudd were to sign it, it will, quote, sign your freedom, your democracy and your prosperity away forever, and neither you nor any subsequent government that you may elect would have any power whatsoever to take it back again. This is serious stuff.
It's very serious stuff. And I'll tell you why this is. Because international treaties, by their very character, are above the mere constitutions of the nations that sign them. And so what happens is that these treaties stand alongside your constitution, but the terms of the treaty take precedence over your own constitution. That's the whole point of treaties. You can't sign a treaty and then say, ha, I didn't mean it. My constitution says I can get out of it. There'd be no point in treaties if you could do that. And so if you sign a treaty, and if there is no provision within that treaty for your withdrawal from its provisions other than by negotiation, then you have with all the other states parties to that treaty in order to get out of it.
Just stand for a minute, Lord Monckton. Lord Monckton, I'll just interrupt you for a minute. It is 7:30, but I'm going to stay with Lord Monckton. I'm speaking to Christopher Monckton, who is a 56-year-old British politician, a business consultant, a policy advisor, a writer, a columnist, now a peer, Lord Monckton, a former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, and a speech that he's made in America, St. Paul, Minnesota, has drawn attention to details of this so-called climate change meeting in Copenhagen. You said, Lord Monckton, to the Americans, I think it's here in your great nation, which I so love and I so admire, it's here that perhaps at this 11th hour, at the 59th minute and 59th second, you will rise up and you'll stop your president from signing that dreadful treaty, that purposeless treaty. Quote, there's no problem with the climate, and even if there were, economically speaking, there's nothing we can do about it. How can people rise up if they don't know?
Well, in America, 1 million people have made hits on the website extract you've just read was made. And so they are now rising up. I'm now going to speak at one or two tea parties. I'm going to be on the major national television show, Glenn Beck, for an hour on Friday next week. So the message in America is now out. I got it also right across Canada when I was up there on the front page of the National Post, so they know about it. Now you know about it, and you need to spread the word. And what we're going to do is put together an instrument of repudiation, which all democratic nations can sign and the people of their nations can sign, saying this treaty will not speak for us, we will not regard it as binding us, and when we take office once again in government, we will repeal this treaty and we will not regard it as binding on us. That's the most we can do. Get on to your representatives and tell them you don't want this treaty. This treaty shall not pass. I'm going to have to go because I'm now due to do another broadcast up in Canada. Good
on you. Good to talk to you. I hope we can talk again.
God bless you. Thank you very much.
You too. That's Lord Christopher Monckton. Now, that's consistent with what I talked about. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And I'll get some details for you as to where we can access the speech that he made in St. Paul, Minnesota. And remember, I mentioned last week at the meeting of global editors at Copenhagen a fortnight ago, where there were scientists of all sorts of distinction, including people like Professor Kenneth Rogoff, the Professor of Public Policy and Economics at Harvard, the Nobel Laureate and Columbia University Economics Professor Joseph Stiglitz, the former Mexican president who's now Professor of International Economics at Yale University. All these people telling a conference in Copenhagen 2 weeks ago, that was a conference of editors, newspapers, that an emissions trading scheme, even if the world were warming, was the wrong scheme. That once you've got emissions trading, permits will become an asset class and they can go from anywhere between $300, $200, $2,000, which produces the very environment we've just been through. Now, no one from government has told us in this country that it'll be a tax. I mean, coal mines will close, jobs will be lost, but then, as I said last week, 31,478 American scientists have signed a petition, 9,029 of them with PhDs, urging the United States government to reject the global warming agreement. Now, there is Lord Monckton saying there's this treaty. I knew nothing about that till I read his speech in Minnesota. And he's arguing, he basically said, here is a thing that we'll sign. If you sign this treaty, and he said they'll all sign it, you'll sign your freedom, your democracy and your prosperity away forever. He said in the speech, neither you nor any subsequent government you may elect would have any power whatsoever to take it back again. That's how serious it is. And he said, I've seen the stuff about government, climate, debt and enforcement. They're going to do this to you whether you like it or whether you don't. And he said to the Americans, and you heard he's going to another interview there now, I think it's here in your great nation, which I so love, he said to Americans, and so admire, it's here that perhaps at this 11th hour, at the 59th minute and 59th second, you'll rise up and you'll stop your president from signing that dreadful treaty, that purposeless treaty. Now, Peter Harcher, writing at the weekend, said the last time Kevin Rudd had anything to say on what before the election was the great moral and economic challenge of our time, the last time he spoke about it was the 16th of April. Now, basically, by denying the public information and the truth about all of this, the Prime Minister is himself betraying the well-being and future of this country.